we're sitting at a moment in time where human intelligence and artificial intelligence are at war. But when brilliant technologists, researchers, and visionaries come together, we can design technologies that help move humanity forward. So Ben, this is not your first rodeo. You started with Pinterest, building the most inspirational corner of the internet. And now you've gone on to build How We Feel, which, without any marketing, has had over 2 million downloads in the App Store. It was also named the Social Impact App of the Year by Apple in 2022. That is a phenomenal feat. Your vision has always been to build world-class tools to help people learn about themselves. When it comes to feelings, you have to actually believe that feelings matter. And so before we even get into today's conversation, can you ground us in why you created How We Feel and what How We Feel actually gives us the permission to access and identify our feelings?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for coming to our session. Appreciate it. So look, I think that like self-understanding and self-knowledge, it's kind of the foundation of your connection with other people, with your ability to sort of operate properly in the world. And I think that there are so many tools out there to understand what everyone else's opinion is and what everyone else feels, but there aren't as many tools that are really designed to understand what you feel and how you should navigate the world. And so I think there's just this really exciting opportunity to use technology, not to distract you or to focus you on what's going on outside, but to help you understand what's going on inside so that you can take lessons away and navigate the world in a more wise way and build better connections and find more success in whatever you choose to do.
In many ways, you went from Pinterest to now How We Feel, which is really focused on development from the inside out, whereas traditional technologies is focusing on how others feel about you. And James, can you maybe give us a little preview into How We Feel and how it actually works?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lars. So How We Feel is a free app designed to help people build emotional intelligence skills in a structured and science-backed way. And the 3 value propositions of the app are that it helps you expand your emotional vocabulary. We use this really neat, artful mood meter that we'll show in a minute. So you can go beyond the words just meh, or good, or fine, or okay to describe what you're feeling and accurately get to the right word. The second value proposition is the app helps you learn strategies and tools for regulating those emotions, whether that means calming down, or getting unstuck, or savoring an emotional state. And the third value proposition is that we help you spot patterns in your emotional well-being over time. So you can start to see the connection between how you feel and what's happening in your life, your relationships, and your environment. And you can see a little preview of the app up here on the screen.
Thanks, James. Now, Mark, the ruler approach has been implemented in over 5,000 schools, and by creating How We Feel, that's been implemented alongside that to actually support students and educators. Why is it so important to actually have not only the vocabulary to define your emotions, but also the skills to regulate yourself? And how does the tool actually do that?
Yeah, so let me just ask everyone a question. How many of you like to be around people who are unemotionally self-aware and not skilled at dealing with their feelings? How many of you are like, yes, that's who I want to marry, that's who I want to work with? So I think the motivation is pretty obvious, in terms of the why. These are skills that we know matter for all aspects of our lives, from our ability to focus, whether it be at home or at school or at work, our ability to make sound decisions, our ability to maintain healthy relationships. Certainly, it's the backbone of our mental and physical health. And then finally, just attaining the goals we have in life. Life is filled with emotions that oftentimes get in the way of our success. So I think that's just at the heart of the app. What was your second part of the question?
I mean, really, I was just wondering how you do that, and also how you actually, through the app, give people the skills that they need to deal with their emotions, because naming them is part one. But then once you know you're feeling anxious or depressed, you actually have to know what to do about it.
Yeah, and sometimes it is doing nothing, which is okay, because you don't always need to regulate. But so the tool, when you get to use the tool, it's on both Android and iOS. The heart of the tool is this tool we call the mood meter, which is based in science, which basically says that how we feel at any given moment is a product of 2 dimensions. The first is pleasantness. So take a moment right now and just ask yourself, how pleasant are you? -5 would mean that you're the most unpleasant you've ever been. Hopefully you're not there. -3 I call everyday misery. Then you got neutral, maybe +3 unpleasantness, or +5. You're just like, you're looking at us and you're thinking, I have no words for this experience. So where are you right now? Honestly, can you just give yourself a number? On the y-axis, it says energy. Technically, it's activation level. So do you feel energized or do you feel depleted? What is your body telling you right now? What are you feeling in your body? What are you feeling in your mind? And essentially what we do with the mood meter is we cross these two axes and we have these 4 quadrants, the yellow, the red, the blue, and the green. And as you can see here from the picture, yellow emotions are high energy, pleasant feelings like happy, excited, elated, hopeful. Green emotions are pleasant but lower in energy, calm, content, tranquil, peaceful, relaxed. The red and the blue, I'm going to say up front, are unpleasant emotions, not bad, not negative. The red is the anxiety and the anger family, and the blue would be the sad kind of disappointment family. And so the step that we take first is build that vocabulary, build that self-awareness, and then decide, do I need to stay or do I need to shift? And then we provide strategies to do that.
Well, I think technology at its best can really help augment and enhance the human experience. And one of the things that I loved when I first started using How We Feel was the social aspect of it. And I know, Ben, your work at Pinterest and beyond has always been designing products that help people ultimately become more inspired and learn more about themselves, but you've always been very conscious about incorporating research at the heart of that. And so I'd love to hear either from you or James a little bit more about the social aspect of How We Feel, and then ultimately how you're seeing users use that in their everyday lives.
Yeah, I can take the question on how we're seeing people use it. So we've seen a wide range of people come to How We Feel, each with their own different need and goal. But broadly speaking, they fall within a few key groups. There are those that come to the app that are looking to connect more deeply with maybe one other person or their family. And those people are able to share emotions in the app with somebody else if they want to. There are those using the app in collaboration with a caregiver. They're not exclusively using the app to share their emotions with their caregiver, whether that's a counselor or a therapist or a coach. But what they are using the app for is in between those sessions to get a little bit more of an objective understanding of where their emotional well-being is at. And I know this is specifically focused more on the social features, so I'll just say that you can share in the app, but it's not something you need to do with the app.
Now, one of the other things that we were talking about a little earlier, which I found to be really fascinating, is the idea that by using How We Feel or technology and AI in the right way, that you can actually have power or design your own emotional life. And I think for a lot of kids, when we're living in a world of technology where most kids are scrolling more than they're sleeping, walking, or socializing, that feels almost impossible. Can you talk a little bit about the science of that and how you're weaving that into the consumer experience?
Sure. I think, one of the great things about having an app to check in with your feelings is that, we have terrible memories for how we have felt over the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks. And by using a tool like How We Feel, it takes about a minute or two to check in. And you can set reminders once a day, twice a day, 3, 4 times a day. And then it aggregates your data over time. And I think what happens for a lot of people is that they're surprised. As a matter of fact, a lot of people say, I just thought I was a lot less happy. I thought it was more miserable. And actually, now that I look at my data, I'm actually in a better place than I thought I was. So I think that is just really important for people, that our memory of how we feel is biased by how we're feeling in the moment. So if we're feeling miserable today, we think, oh, I've been feeling this way for weeks, but it's not necessarily the case. And maybe, Ben, you want to add to that?
Well, I think that, part is that self-awareness. I mean, we get write-ins all the time on both sides of it. Like, we get write-ins. I remember one father wrote in. He's like, I'm a pretty chill person, except right after work, which happens to be like when my kids are at home. And seeing the data made me realize, like, wait a minute, like, I might see myself as a very relaxed, chill person, but my kids see me as this really stressed out person, and that's not the person that I want to be. And so I need to come up with some kind of strategy to help me go into it. And so the first step is just providing that level of almost psychological distance through the process of checking in and through precise naming. And then what a lot of people write in with the app now is that after they've taken that first step, we've introduced a very lightweight AI feature, which will then ask you the second question. Why are you feeling that way? How are you looking at that situation? And it seems really simple. I think we've all had that experience. A friend comes to us for relationship advice, and when you're outside of it, it's so much easier to see it clearly than when you're inside of it. And I think actually the same is true with ourselves. And so something about that process of externalizing it and having an AI then ask you follow-up questions. And it doesn't tell you how you're supposed to feel or what you're supposed to do. It reflects back to you what you're saying, but allows you to sort of engage your cognitive capacity to think about it a little bit more objectively. And I think that's really exciting. I think that most of the time people spend on their phone is without intention and is mindless. I think that everyone relates to this feeling, you wake up, you haven't had coffee, you reach for your phone, and you're 4 emails, 2 texts, 5 tweets in, and all of these external forces have dictated in some ways how you felt and what you're thinking about, even before you've had a chance to literally get out of bed. And there's one school of thought, which is everyone should just shut off their phone all the time, which I just don't see it happening. And then there's another school of thought, which is, could we build tools that actually help you understand yourself better and develop that self-control and self-understanding and teach you those skills and strategies? And we're more in that second camp. I'm all for people turning off their phone as well. I think that's great, but I don't think it's realistic. I think what's more realistic is giving people the tools internally that they learn and then applying it into other spheres of their life.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because in a lot of the work that we do, we really see and are in that second camp that technology is a social determinant of public health. And for kids in places, especially in communities that have less resources, being able to use technology and things like How We Feel that help you tune into yourself and your world in a better way is a very clear example of what active and positive and mindful tech consumption is. And we do need to move away from this world where abstinence in tech is going to work, because we know for kids it certainly doesn't. So How We Feel is a great way to mindfully engage. Now, we did talk about, okay, the first step, taking us through this, knowing that our feelings matter, actually naming them. I think what we see with How We Feel, and what's really important, is that it is a nonprofit, which means that you are not building a tool where the time is the bottom line for whether or not the product actually exists. And when you look at a lot of these AI tools that are coming out when it relates to emotional intelligence, there's a lot of danger around trying to replace humans, trying to say that you are this AI that can solve all of the problems for regardless of where you're sitting in the equation. But what I'm really curious about is, through this, you're getting a lot of data and you are learning a lot. And I'm curious how We Feel, Mark, kind of going back to Ruler, how that is impacting your design, development, and iteration of that, and what are some of the key takeaways that you're getting?
Well, I think we are learning that people are not that emotionally literate. And so we're trying to train people to build that vocabulary. And that's important. I think people underestimate the value of emotional self-awareness. The best example I have is, I'm a professor by day, and I have students who have the highest SAT scores out of any place in the world, and they don't know the differences between anxiety and stress. And as a matter of fact, my students a couple of years ago, I'm stressed. And fine, I understand that you can be stressed, but I said, journal about, what's going on? We have a part of our app where you can journal about why you're feeling the way you're feeling, like the questions that Ben mentioned. And all of a sudden, the themes around their stress were not really about having too many demands and not enough resources. They weren't about uncertainty around their future. It was all about social comparison. This one's richer than me. This one's got more connections than I have. This one, has better lips. This one has better hips. I mean, literally, it was all about everyone else being better than they were. And so I went back to my students and I said, what do you think the emotion word is that's actually describing your feelings? And it was envy. They could not believe, that they were living in envy. And then, just a quick story about this, I went to the counseling center and I said to them, what's our university's envy reduction program? And I was glad I had tenure when I said that. But it wasn't popular because, we like quick fixes. And I think what we're trying to build is a tool that gives people, really great self-awareness, but then also we have, as we mentioned, lots of strategies in there. And, we're gonna map those strategies onto different feelings. So, for example, when you're anxious, maybe taking a deep breath will help, but probably you're gonna need some cognitive strategies. Mark, you have no control over that, giving yourself that ability to reframe. Whereas when you're feeling envy, it might be something completely different.
Thank you for sharing. One of the key pieces of this tool is the ability to actually spot patterns. And as leaders, whether it be in a school environment or a professional environment, you have to be really thinking about the opportunity cost of the investment or the time that you're putting into creating or implementing a new tool. Can you talk about some of the contexts outside of the educational setting that people are using How We Feel for, and how you're actually analyzing the success or how it's helping them with managing their workforces?
I can take a stab at this question. So just to take a step back and just explain a little bit more about How We Feel. I know that we've talked about it being a nonprofit organization. It's a free app. I think it's important here just to note for the audience that there's very limited data collection whatsoever. By default, all of the data is stored on device. When you create an account with How We Feel, if you want to create an account, it's not backing up your data to the cloud. So just please keep that in mind as we talk about how people are finding use with the app. I mentioned that there are these key groups of people that we see using the app. We've seen people using the app with a significant other, right? They're doing more of like a one-to-one sharing. We've seen people using the app to share within groups. We also see people who are just really curious about emotional intelligence. Maybe they want to become an emotion scientist. One of the strategies that we have in the app is a video series about going from an emotion judge to an emotion scientist. We built that in collaboration with Mark's team. Another key group that we see come into the app is people who are trying to optimize for a facet of their life. So I think this really gets to the question you're having here about how might people be using this in different contexts. A couple months ago, we spoke to a professional runner who is using the app to try to understand how his emotional well-being impacts his performance with his athletics. Our app's listed on the NBA Cares website, so we do see people who are trying to connect their emotional well-being to the goals that they have, whether those are goals for their workplace, whether those are goals for their social well-being, or just their overall day-to-day well-being. You also asked a question here about how we're maybe doing research or making connections behind that. That's something that we've been talking with Mark and his team about. We don't have anything implemented in the app today that would help us understand what that direct connection is between the app usage and certain outcomes. We are really curious about that, and people have actually asked us if they can support us in that way. They're curious about being these citizen scientists that can have their data going to the greater good. We've just been very cautious about approaching that path.
Well, I'm glad that you are being cautious, because many people are racing at lightning speed without any caution or really thinking about what the opportunity cost is for humanity, which is why we're here to hopefully create an opportunity for all of you to participate and use How We Feel in your environments. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about is this concept of time. And many leaders feel like it's the #1 thing that they don't have. Kids are constantly racing for the next thing. There's more pressure than ever. How much time does it take to actually tune in with yourself and make a change that over time will support you in your everyday life?
About a minute.
Wow, only a minute.
I mean, it can take longer if you want to do some deep reflection, but the point of the app is to really train people to make this a habit. And so for me, it takes, I'm very emotionally aware, at least I think I am. My family may say otherwise. And, once you start understanding, like taking that complexity, it's overwhelming for a lot of people in the beginning. Like, I've never really been precise about how I've felt. I say fine, good, okay, or blah. And now we're saying, no, get granular. There's 144 words. That takes time to learn those words, those definitions. But once you do, it really is quite liberating because it's just, you automatically say, oh, I'm in that red quadrant, I'm high red, I'm enraged. I'm in that green quadrant, I'm feeling content. I'm in that blue, I'm not really sad, I'm disappointed. No, I'm not disappointed, I'm feeling hopeless. I'm, whatever it might be. And that is important. I want to get one anecdote that I have related to the use of the app. We have a phrase in our center that we say you have to name it to tame it. Other people have used that phrase too. But one thing that's interesting about our emotions is that they mostly impact our choices and our behavior unconsciously. I mean, think about it for a minute. How many of you have ever been mean or cruel to somebody? Be honest, come on. And how many of you in that moment of saying like, I hate you, you thought to yourself, gosh, I'm having a strong feeling right now that's driving my nasty behavior. Like, that's just not the way we operate. It's like, boom, we get hijacked and we go for the jugular. What we know from research is that if you take a moment to just, like, you've had a rough day at work, you take a minute, take a deep breath, check in on the mood meter. Well, what's cool is that once you attribute your emotion to its actual cause, it no longer will have that subconscious influence over the behavior. So to me, that's amazing to help people build awareness that then changes their relationships and their behavior.
In the spirit of awareness, I like to say that the opposite of artificial intelligence is infinite awareness. And as we're building at the speed of light, one of the big things, or the things that really keeps me up at night, is if we're implementing this technology not only in schools but in workforces, how do we ensure that the technology that we're creating is actually emotionally competent? Because if we're implementing these things early on, middle school, elementary school, I think we all saw the halls filled with AI this, tutor, friend, XYZ 1, 2, 3. How do we actually make sure that these are being designed for humans? And Ben, I'm sure you're thinking a lot about this, as this is something that you've crossed before it and you're building at Pinterest. And I'm curious, what do you think the future is, and how can we ensure that artificial intelligence becomes more human?
That's a big question. I think right now we're really in the early days of artificial intelligence. I think that it almost seems impossible to imagine. I think in some ways it's underhyped how much it's going to change a lot of our day-to-day behaviors. And some of those things will be good and some won't be good, but like technology doesn't have a moral compass. It's just technology. I think with how we feel, what I'm really interested in helping people do is develop the skills to be a fully functional human being on their own. And I think emotional skills in particular feel like woefully behind in terms of people's awareness and education of them. My parents are doctors and my sisters are doctors. And it's funny because like physical wellness only became like a thing in the 1970s. Like wellness as a word was like this hippy dippy Northern California thing. Illness is what you focused on. And these hippies were like, wellness is the antonym of illness, and we're gonna all study that. And now it'd be crazy to think that kids and adults wouldn't be educated on what you should eat, on why physical movement is important. And today, everyone hears about mental illness, right, as this massive social harm. All the stats support it. But this idea of like what is mental wellness or emotional wellness still feels kind of like physical wellness in the 1970s. And so I think that where AI can help is it can accelerate people's self-understanding and their ability to navigate these things on their own. And I think where it can send people in the wrong direction is it can become a codependent companion where people start using it as a replacement for pro-social behaviors. I talked to someone the other day, they're like, loneliness is a huge problem. The Surgeon General was talking about it. And I was like, I'm with you. And they're like, and so we've got a solution. We're gonna let you talk to this AI, and they'll be your best friend and they'll get to know you. And they're like, what could go wrong? I was like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of shit could go wrong. And so I think that when I think about it, I think one, there has to be some sort of very crisp, like humanist goal. And with how we feel that goal is to teach you these skills. So eventually you don't have to use the app. Like our goal is not to make you like a daily active user in perpetuity. I think there has to be a business model that's aligned with that goal, which is quite important. And if you think about broadly consumer internet, there are only a few business models, right? There's pay for it, There's use it and we'll sell you something else. That's the advertising model. And then there's use it and the data will be used for other things. And I think none of those feel like a great business model for this kind of software, because we don't want you to have it be inaccessible if you can't afford it. We don't want to be selling your emotional data, and it doesn't feel like the right place to be advertising things, and that's why it's set up as a nonprofit. So I think the two things that I think about are being very crisp on the goal, building a business model that aligns to it, and then periodically measuring what is the actual impact of the software, because like any technology, there are unintended impacts, and we can make technology better, over time. Like, it took a while to put seatbelts in cars. Now we have seatbelts. It's way better. And similarly, it'll take a while to figure out what are the dangers of new technologies, but people have to be very committed to being transparent about what those risks are. Otherwise, you can't build better solutions towards that end.
I mean, we haven't passed a legislation nationally in almost 30 years that protects young people. So we're very far behind on the seatbelts. And at this point, it's up to the technologists to make those decisions, which luckily you made a lot of those good ones at Pinterest, but we don't have a world that really holds us accountable in that way. So as we wrap this up, I'd love to hear, looking forward for how we feel, where it is today, where it is tomorrow. I'd love to hear what's on your roadmap. What do you envision? I know that customers are asking for new features every day, but I'd love to hear from you. What can we all be looking forward to?
Yeah, I'll start with that. And also want to invite the audience to check in. Mark, I know you said it would take about a minute, so we'll see if that's the case. First, on the roadmap, we're really curious about how we can still connect these emotional regulation strategies and tools to emotional check-ins. So when they're needed, what will be most applicable? How can we help people? We're still iterating on the very few features we have with artificial intelligence. Just to make this really quick, there are two features. One is this question feature, which again is more of a guided journaling. It's only going to ask you to go a little bit deeper for your own self-awareness. It's not going to tell you how to feel. It's not going to give you advice. And the other AI feature is just summarizing information for you. So those are the two near-term things that we're going to continue working toward. And long-term, really excited to help people try to make more connection between what they're feeling emotionally and some of these sensations they have. As somatic check-in is what we refer to it as. But I'll pass it to Mark and Ben because maybe they have a couple other things they want to add.
I'm excited because we're going to have people opt in to do research, and so we're going to really understand who this app is working for, how it's working for them. So, for example, is it 1 or 2 check-ins a day? Is it 3 or 4 check-ins a day? Is it getting more granular with your vocabulary? Is it using the regulation strategies? And so we'll be able to look at all these data, and then we're incorporating measures of social well-being, psychological well-being, purpose and meaning in life to really examine the impact of the app's use on people's lives.
So really, I think the call to action here is to use technology as a window into your children's worlds, your partner's worlds, your fellow community members' worlds, because when it's used the right way, we can help understand each other better. So I encourage you all, if you haven't yet, download How We Feel. Give yourself permission to feel something. Maybe strike up a conversation with someone you love. And also, if you have ideas, How We Feel is a nonprofit. Please reach out to James at howwefeel.org. Share if you want to bring How We Feel into your company, educate new up-and-coming employees. I find that this is incredibly critical for recent graduates entering the workforce. They're all ears, and I'm here to be their champion. So thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Lars.
Thanks, everybody.